Welcome to Preservation Oaks, the podcast where we invite you to step away from the bustle of everyday life. Settle in and relax, and take a moment to leave the familiar behind as we explore the hidden gems of America that preserve our cultural past. We call them our Preservation Oaks, and with each episode, we'll journey to a different corner of the country, where we'll discover the unique histories, landscapes, and communities that make up our nation. We'll visit with local museums, historical, and genealogical societies. They are the stewards of these stories. They preserve the legacy of each place like precious pieces of fabric in a quilt that binds the freedom-loving, hard-working people in this country together. So, slow down, grab a beverage, open your mind, and let us take you on a tour of the fascinating histories and heartfelt traditions that lie just beyond the horizon. This is Preservation Oaks, where every story is a stitch in the fabric of our shared culture. Now, join our host, Sean Radcliff, as he uncovers another thread in the tapestry of America's heritage and what it takes to preserve it.
Welcome back to Preservation Oaks, everybody. The podcast where we go state by state, highlighting the work of museums, historical societies, genealogical groups, and the dedicated people working to keep local history alive. I'm your host, Sean Radcliff, coming to you from beautiful Salt Lake City, Utah. As I've mentioned before, our podcast is traveling across the country to feature some of the most remarkable historical and genealogical organizations in America. We're currently in the great state of Colorado, and I'm proud to say that once we complete this state, Preservation Oaks will have covered 20% of the United States, and then we're going to do something different. After Colorado, we'll be engaging with guests in Georgia, Tennessee, and West Virginia, all in the same season. Today, we're headed to Parker, Colorado, to talk with the Parker Area Historical Society, known as Parker History, and its vice president, Mrs. Catherine Traffis. As many of you listeners know, our main platform is preservationoaks.podbean.com. But you can also find us on nearly all major podcast platforms, as well as Rumble, TikTok, Spotify, and YouTube. So wherever you listen to the program, I truly appreciate it when you like, comment, follow, or subscribe. And if you're interested in being a guest on our program, or if you have questions or comments, please feel free to email us at preservationoaks@gmail.com. Now, if you only know Parker as a modern Colorado town, there's a much deeper story beneath the surface. The history of this area stretches back through native hunting grounds, early trail travel near Cherry Creek, stage routes, the old Pine Grove Way Station, the 20-Mile House, railroad expansion, early schools, dairy farming, and a small incorporated community that steadily grew into that much larger Parker people recognize today. Parker History is a volunteer-led organization dedicated to studying, preserving, recording, and sharing the history of Parker and the surrounding region. The Society operates the Parker Heritage Center, supports preservation projects, and works to make local history accessible through exhibits, events, educational outreach, and public programming. One of the things I really appreciate about this area is that Parker's history doesn't just live in documents and dates. It lives in cabins, schoolhouses, stage stops, photographs, cemetery stories, old trails, and the everyday details that suddenly make the past feel real and personal. The Society's museum includes artifacts, photographs, a short film, and a detailed diorama of World War I-era Parker. The organization also maintains the Tallman Newland Cabin, the town's only remaining log structure, and one of the last direct physical connections to Parker's earliest years. So with that, let's get into it. All right, this is Preservation Oaks Podcast, episode 124. Let's see what we can learn today. Catherine, welcome to Preservation Oaks. I want to take just a moment to recognize the community we're talking about. Parker, Colorado is a beautiful place. It's a pleasure to spend some time today exploring its history with you and learning more about Parker history and the people working to preserve it. Parker carries echoes of those earlier days where prairie horizons, ranching heritage, and community spirit remain woven into its identity. Parker's truly a wonderful place. Thank you for being here, Catherine.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Catherine, before we get into the history of Parker, I'd love to start with you. What first pulled you into local history personally?
Actually, I became interested in history through music history. I have a degree in musicology, and that was kind of as a young person, that was where I made my connection. For a while, I lived in the UK, and I worked at the Society of Antiquaries of London,
Oh, you're kidding
which
me.
is
Wow.
an incredible old place, kind of difficult to relate to, what that would be in our society, but what it is a royal learned society. So it's a place that has had a royal charter for 300 years to preserve history. And that really solidified things for me, and so I moved quite a bit after that before settling in Parker. And I tried to connect with the history in every place that I landed. It's just kind of how I do, getting involved in a community. But now I've been here for, 20 some odd years. So I've become quite entrenched in the local history.
Yeah. Were you originally from London?
No, I'm actually Canadian. I'm from Toronto.
Oh, okay. That's how you ended up in London. Okay.
Well, yeah, that's a very long story, but it had to do with musical stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I've always been interested in. My mom and dad have always been interested in. All my cousins, we all have a different connection to history.
Have you written any songs or any of that?
I'm not much of a composer, but I do play the piano, and my kids play instruments, and we have a lot of fun together.
Gosh, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
For people listening who may never have interacted with a local historical society, what does your role as vice president actually look like?
Well, it looks a lot like being a jack of all trades. I can tell you that. I think that for everyone who's part of our historical society, it's really a labor of love because it's all volunteer. And actually, we've had retired people on our boards in the past, but right now we have all but one are people with day jobs. So we do things in our spare time, and that means we have to run everything. I mean, as the vice president, I run all the events and, planning our events for the year, either educational or, outdoor celebrations, that kind of thing. And I also get all the interesting questions from the community through the website. So I have to take care of the website and the calendar, and be in costume and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I bet that's fun. It's
Just to
quite
be
interesting to me that Parker History was founded in 1986, only a few years after Parker Incorporated in 1981. Was there already a sense at that time that the town was changing quickly and that pieces of the older community history needed to be preserved before they disappeared?
Yes, I mean, it definitely was actually a very urgent need at the time. I think that, like a lot of Colorado communities that have seen a lot of development through the 80s and 90s, we're not unique in that respect, but I think that we were somewhat unique in that particular urgency. It's such a crazy story because in the late 70s, there was a company called the Parker City Land Company that decided that they were going to develop Parker into a tiny Victorian village. They started taking down some of the genuine older buildings in the town. And they had this crazy plan where there was going to be a tram that ran up and down the main street. And it was all going to be very cute with gingerbread houses. And it went bankrupt and
Oh,
left Parker with some empty lots in what is now our downtown historic district. And I think that, you know, the incorporation came very much out of that experience, actually trying to make it its own political identity as opposed to just being part of unincorporated Douglas County.
right.
And yes, the historical society quickly followed. So in the early years, our society was called the Parker Area Historical Society at the time. We've now taken on the name Parker History, but we are still a historical society. But it was very much focused on urgently preserving what we had. Having done that, for the most part, we've moved into more educational and community enrichment cultural events.
Yeah, the town is absolutely beautiful. Listeners, if you get on your favorite map app and look at Parker, Colorado, you're going to find a wonderful, beautiful town. It's really nice. So your historical society, Parker History now, was founded out of a catastrophe of somebody trying to ad hoc change the town.
And make it, I have heard that there were people who wanted to make it sort of a rootin' tootin' Western town,
Oh, yeah.
big hootenanny of a town. But in doing that, what they actually were doing was making it look like a little Victorian village. They even went so far as to build a cute little fire station with 3 doors that said 1, 2, 3, that they built the doors so that they weren't wide enough to accommodate modern fire trucks at the time.
Oh, goodness.
So the building sat and did nothing. Like it really is, it was a total comedy of errors, what was going on. And so, yeah, so people got together and decided they needed to preserve Parker's actual history before some other developer's ideas ran away with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic story. Thank you for sharing. That is a lesson. That really is.
It is. It is. It has been a lesson, and I hope that we've learned from it.
If someone young, say a high school student or a college-age listener, asks you, why should I care about local history? What would you tell them?
I think what really has always fascinated me about getting involved in my local history is the stories that have to do with human ingenuity and perseverance. And I think in the West, we have a really unique opportunity to look into that and see how it connects with, the American dream that we're always after, which, isn't always possible for everybody, but we still strive towards it. I think that it's also really important for young people to look at the past and decide, based on the successes and the mistakes of the past, how to be a good citizen. I think Parker's history tells that story very well, in terms of how they have come together as a community over the years to create a joint prosperity for one another. And that's something that you can really only understand from looking at the human stories, not just what's going on around you, what the trendy things in the present day, but where we came from. You can't really have too many opinions about where you want the world to be in 10 years if you're not looking at what happened in the past 10 years or 100 years or 1,000 years.
Well said. Thank you for that. When people first come to Parker history, what do you hope they feel?
I think that, the town council from the very beginning, from their incorporation in 1981, which, gosh, we blinked and now it's 45 years ago. They have always had as part of their motto that they would want to preserve the small town feel.
Right.
And I think they've done that quite successfully. I mean, there are a lot of cookie cutter homes being built in the area. I live in one of them, but I think that, by preserving a central district and some of our historic buildings and, creating some common traditions for ourselves, it really does have that small town feel that they've striven for from the beginning.
Yeah, it really does. When I go through the town on my map app, yeah, it does have that small town feel, definitely.
It really does. I think that's something that people who buy homes here want.
Yeah, makes sense. I think this is a perfect place to jump into the town itself because Parker has one of those interesting histories where place really matters, where geography, travel, timing, and the people who passed through all shaped what came next.
Mm-hmm.
If Parker's history were a movie, what would the opening scene be?
Well, I think that, it would have to go back to the archaic Plains Indians because, we can't forget that before the whole Wild West story, there was a Native American story that's equally important. And, we found when they were building the Ruderhest Reservoir, that's just a mile or two from my house, archaeologists found a 7,000-year-old settlement there full of, not temporary, semi-permanent houses. They were archaic Plains Indians basin houses where you dig a foundation and build a teepee-like structure over top or an earthen structure over top.
Oh, cool.
So it's really, and it's entirely because we found mammoth bones out there too in the same area. It's very possible that the people who were here were mammoth slaying, very hardy people. So I think that some of those traditions are very important to recognize as an opening scene. But of course, I think what we're better known for is the gold rush of the 1850s. And
Okay.
those wagons that said Pikes Peak or bust on the side, that's exactly where you are. That's exactly where those wagons would come through and stop for the night.
Fantastic. Yeah, that would be a good opening scene. Thank you for
It
that.
would. It would.
Yeah.
If you had a big enough piece of land to get a grip on, sort of like the trails and things like that, that would be very, very interesting to get we forget now that we have infrastructure here how vast it was and how intimidating it was
Yeah, very much
as a
so.
landscape.
Very much so. Did you have like sod houses in your area where people had to build those first and then hunker down until they could build something else?
People did actually, yes, they built dugouts. Actually, just very, very close to where I am at this point in time, they had dugouts in the gulch behind me. I think that was, with wooden fronts, that was an easy way to use the materials around them just to get started,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and then later on build something a little bit larger and a little bit larger.
Yeah, because you had to stay warm somehow.
You had to, and with the Homestead Act of 1862, there were so many people coming out here, such extremely large pieces of land to settle. I mean, I think sometimes we forget how mammoth a task that would have been to prove up a piece of land that's 160 acres big
Oh, yeah,
and to just come out and there be absolutely nothing there. So yeah, I mean, you started where you could.
absolutely. What great people.
It's amazing, isn't it?
For listeners who don't know this story, how do you usually explain Parker's earliest beginnings?
Well, I think that, once we've sort of told some of the Native American story, we would point towards the fact that, Denver was sort of the gateway to the Rockies during the gold rush. And people started coming across the Cherokee Trail and the Smoky Hill Trail. Parker is at the conjunction of those two trails, or the south branch of the Smoky Hill Trail, to be exact, because it did branch off in places. And ultimately, our community grew up around the stagecoach stop that was placed at that conjunction. So that was called the 20-mile house. And the reason why it was called the 20-mile house was because it's 20 miles from Denver, from a particular point in Denver. And there was a whole slew of them. There was the 17-mile house, which is just over the county line down Parker Road in Arapahoe County. And that's actually perfectly preserved. You can visit that whole stagecoach stop. So I think that, there was a need for people using these old Native American trails to stop and be able to get provisions and things like that, to have blacksmith services, to be able to stay the night, be able to get a meal. And that's what the 20-mile house became.
Yeah, I think it's so cool that it's 20 miles from something or it's 17 miles from
Yeah,
something. And so we call it the 20-mile house. It's just
we
amazing.
do. And, I think that, for people who have access to Denver or closer to Denver, the 4-mile house, the one that you would hit right before you arrived in town, that one is gorgeously preserved. That is a local treasure.
And it let people know where they were too. It's not like
It
you
let
had cell
people.
phones or anything like that back then, right?
That's right. I mean, it must have been such a daunting task.
Oh,
The
yeah.
original, originally before there was real postal service in this area, some of these stops were the only way that you could leave messages for people who were on the trail behind you, or you would just post it on the wall
Yeah.
until it was claimed. It was just a way station.
Yeah. And they didn't have Post-it notes or anything.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, our town wasn't called Parker for a very long time. It was actually called Pine Grove because Alfred Butters, the fella who first built the structure, built it in a grove of pine trees. They moved it when it became the 20-mile house
Okay.
to be
Wow.
closer to the trails. But his small enterprise was really the very the very beginnings of any kind of infrastructure in this area as we would know it.
Wow, very cool. It wasn't until the 1870s when Pine Grove was renamed to Parker, right?
Yeah, sort of towards the end of the 1870s.
Yeah.
It was just something that when Colorado was a territory rather than an actual state, things were sort of haphazard the way that people were settling the place. And so there actually ended up being two Pine Groves within the U.S. postal system.
Oh, really?
Two Pine Grove, Colorados.
Oh, gosh.
So we had to change ours. And James Sample Parker, who's considered our town's founder, he was one of the longest serving postmaster at the 20 Mile House. He had offered up the name of his daughter, Edith, for the name of the town. He proposed to call it Edithville. Apparently, that, when we tell that story to kids, that always makes the kids laugh. It sounds so silly when you're used to living in a place called Parker. And so the Postal Service said, no, thank you, but we will take your surname.
Oh, wow.
So we were Pine Grove, almost became into Edithville, and then settled into Parker, Colorado.
Wow. Is James Parker buried in the area?
He is. Actually, he was a very forward-looking man, and he established a cemetery just called the Parker Cemetery that has all those early people who founded our town buried there.
Oh, very cool.
And he's right up at the top of the hill. He has pride of place. He's got a great view.
What a history. That's wonderful. You guys ought to be really proud of that.
We are really proud. We are really proud.
I want to give a shout out to a person who lives in Parker named Dennis Niewiner. Is that the right way to say it?
He has told, so based on the spelling of his name, I would have thought that too. And good job there, Sean, checking out your German words, and could be Dutch, but he actually pronounces it Niewiner.
Niewiner, okay.
Yeah, and there's no R in there, and I've told him that he doesn't want to hear that story.
Well, when I was researching some of the history of Parker for this episode, I ran into Dennis Niewiner, and man, he's a historian. He's a great guy. He's done a lot for Parker, and I just wanted to give him a mention on here.
Dennis was a developer here in town before he retired for a long time. And I told you the story of the Parker City Land Company and, their reckless abandon with our historic town. Dennis is the opposite. Dennis actually managed to preserve the only part of the 20 Mile House that remains.
Yep.
Which is the post office portion, complete with the little cubbies and stuff where the mail used to go. And we're so grateful to him for that. And he reserved land for a bit of a park around it so that people could visit it. He's done so much. He did a lot for bringing the first hospital to town and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, and he's got videos out on YouTube talking about Parker history and various aspects of Parker history. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that we were very fortunate after the Parker City Land Company to have developers like him who really cared about what our future was going to look like.
Yeah. So way to go, Dennis. Thank you very much for your contributions.
Yeah. He's a cool guy.
Now, I'd like to provide listeners with the contact information for Parker History. You can visit their website at www.parkerhistory.org. You can email them at pahs@parkerhistory.org. Parker Heritage Center is located in the Schoolhouse at Mainstreet at 19650 Main Street, Parker, Colorado, 80138. And you can find them on Facebook if you look for Parker History, all one word. That sound right?
That sounds right, Sean. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yep, you're welcome. Are there any upcoming events or exhibitions that you think the community will find particularly engaging?
I do. Actually, we've got a good one coming up in July. We have the wonderful owners of the Pollywog Station Lavender Farm. There's a very long story behind why it's called Pollywog Station.
I love that name. Lavender Farm, Pollywog Station.
It is kind of an interesting story. So the owners were very interested in naming it something historical. And there used to be a train that went through town. And there's a very high grade in the station after Parker, which was called Hilltop at the time.
Okay.
And they had to add an extra engine in Parker at the Parker station to get it up the hill, get the train up the hill to Hilltop.
Okay.
And then that extra engine would come back down into Parker and sit on a side. And so the train used to really waggle and struggle on its way up that hill. And so people started saying, here comes the Pollywog. There goes Polly.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And
What?
these would be old steam engines, right? So they were really laboring loudly.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they are going to be holding our local American History Celebration, as you know, and I'm sure all your guests have come on and said, so far this year, it is the 250th anniversary of our nation. And for us here in Colorado, it's also the semi-sesquicentennial.
Yep.
It's our 150th anniversary on August 1st of Colorado becoming a real state. So we are going to be having an American History celebration at the Pollywog Station Lavender Farm on July 18th.
Fantastic. Well, one of the things I always love in these conversations is getting beyond the names and dates and into the human side, the personalities, the close calls, the legends, and the moments that make the place feel lived in. Who are some of the early Parker area figures you wish more people knew by name?
I think that very few people remember Alfred Butters, who actually was the first person who actually built what now remains as 20 miles, a tiny little place. It would have been a tiny place to live. And, we have to give kudos to him because he definitely, he would have helped out travelers immensely in this area as he was himself trying to settle here and, trying to establish himself. There's many things people could do, like in terms of, I think he worked in lumber. So that's a name that's somewhat lost in our history. The big one that people remember is James Sample Parker. He went by
Right.
Jim, and he was our legendary figure. He brought three of his brothers out here with him, and they all had a role to play. But Jim was the one who, had that forward looking plan for Parker. He got involved. He was one of the county commissioners for a time. He got involved in politics. And he and his brother George, who owned a piece of land just east of him, they both donated a great deal of land to make sure that there were rights of way for the railroad when it came through, which I mean was just a huge leap in prosperity for Parkerites. It was absolutely massive. And for things like, the first electrical lines, the first phone lines, all those things, they really, I mean, and Jim had donated the cemetery. He had built the first school, which was called Pine Grove School, a one-room schoolhouse right across from the 20 Mile House property. George had on his side of the street, George Parker's land was what is now our downtown historic district. And he sold off bits of it as he went along, but he was also very generous, giving land for free for churches and schools. So they were very forward-looking, generous people. They were both Civil War veterans too.
Oh, very cool.
On the Union side, since I think you pretty much had to be on the Union side to take advantage of the Homestead Act, because that was kind of part of how it was set up.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I think they really were thinking about the good of the people. They were really some amazing people. And when Jim Parker died, they brought him back to town. He had been, as he was older, staying with relatives in Denver, and they brought him back by train. And there was a huge cortege. It was a very sad moment for everybody. So I would definitely highlight those two.
Okay.
I think that for, other local figures, the O'Brien family are always very intriguing for people because, one of the main, you could almost call it the town green type thing. Like there's O'Brien Park is the main meeting space for our little historic downtown. A lot of events take place there. There's a beautiful park there. There's also a wonderful water park there and baseball diamonds. Just fantastic place. But a lot of people ask, who were these O'Brien people? And that's a very interesting question. They were William and Annie O'Brien, settled in the area, and they bought a ranch just to the south of town where they actually ran, drum roll please, because I don't think you would guess, a tuberculosis sanatorium.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
It wasn't actually started by them, but it was sort of continued and became popular. Of course, you're in Utah, I'm in Colorado. We know the benefits of the dry air, but in the 19th century, it had a lot more benefits than we realize sometimes.
Right.
The people would move out to the West because they had consumption, they had tuberculosis in their lungs, and they could improve their life expectancy by coming out. And they would live in the dry air. And the O'Briens had a farm as well at a place called the Twin Houses. They had two houses side by side, and the patients would come and live in one. So that's something that most people in modern Parker would never even think about, that there was a tuberculosis sanatorium, which had a special medicinal spring on the land,
Right.
which I suppose is still there.
Very cool.
So there's that.
They helped a lot of people then.
Oh, I mean, it's amazing. Even the first doctor of our town had tuberculosis.
Oh, goodness.
It's just strange to think about, but people's health would remarkably improve sometimes if they changed. They got that humidity out of the air.
It was such a scourge back then. People don't realize how many people were taken by that consumption disease.
I think that, when kids ask me if I would ever go live in the past, I always say no because of the medical care.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah. Well, and being a woman too, I've had a couple of difficult births. So, it makes you wonder if you're going to make it.
Absolutely. Catherine, it's time to take a break for a few minutes.
Okay.
Listeners, we'll be right back after an important message about donating to and supporting Parker history.
In the heart of Colorado, where old trails once crossed the prairie and stagecoaches stopped along dusty routes beneath wide western skies, the story of Parker still lives. Parker history is dedicated to preserving the people, places, and memories that shaped Parker and the surrounding region long before modern growth transformed the community into what it is today. Inside the Parker Heritage Center, located in the historic Schoolhouse at Mainstreet, visitors can explore photographs, artifacts, exhibits, and stories that connect today's residents with the generations who came before them. From early homesteaders and dairy farms to railroads, schools, cabins, and stage stops, Parker history works to ensure that local history is not forgotten. But preserving history takes community support. As a volunteer-led organization, Parker History relies on donations from people who believe that local history matters. Donations help preserve historic structures like the Tallman Newland Cabin, maintain the Travel Stories Tour, maintain exhibits and archival collections, support educational programming, and ensure that future generations can continue to experience the rich heritage of Parker, Colorado.
Every photograph preserved, every artifact protected, every story reported, and every child who walks through the museum doors becomes part of a larger mission, protecting the shared memory of a community that continues to grow and change. You can support Parker History today by visiting the website at www.parkerhistory.org. The Parker Heritage Center is located in the Schoolhouse at Mainstreet, 19650 Main Street, Parker, Colorado, 80138. For more information, email pahs@parkerhistory.org. History is not preserved by accident. It survives because people choose to protect it.
Please consider supporting Parker History today.
Welcome to the Genealogy Lab, where curiosity meets discovery. Here's professional genealogist Diana Chrisman-Smith, a seasoned explorer of family histories, uncovering the evidence that connects us across generations. Diana opens the lab doors, and inside her lab, she'll share quick tips,
cool discoveries, and smart tools to help you map out your roots like a pro. So, grab your notebooks. It's time to enhance your research with this segment of the Genealogy Lab.
Welcome to the Genealogy Lab. Pull up a chair and join me for a bit of curiosity and discovery. Were your ancestors like mine and wandered all over the place? I have one couple who had children born in 8 different states, from the Dakota Territories to the Pacific Northwest. And I moved with my own parents through 5 states, 10 different schools before finishing high school. I love maps. Why consult maps? There's so many situations where they are helpful, and tracking the migration of your family across countries or even states or counties can provide valuable clues. Here's a couple of examples. Looking for a person in Tiverton, Rhode Island was very frustrating until I realized that it was right on the dividing line with Massachusetts across the Secaucet River. When researching the history of those states, I learned that the small strip of land containing Tiverton changed hands frequently between its founding in 1694 and the final settlement of the boundary in 1862. So now I know I have to look for records in both states during the time period. They didn't pass them back and forth. They kept what they had and started in the other place. Another family appeared exclusively in Virginia for decades prior to the Revolutionary War. And then they suddenly appeared in West Virginia twice, in Maryland once, and in Connecticut once. Using a map of the region and historical information, confirmed that the West Virginia references were sort of correct, but West Virginia didn't yet exist at that point in time. It wasn't formed until 50 years after those events. So it had just been recorded incorrectly in the source I was using. The Maryland reference was very likely correct because looking at the map, the most contemporaneous Virginia location was right across the river. So that was no big deal. The Connecticut reference is very likely wrong, or another family, because there doesn't seem to be any other connection to this area, and it's hundreds of miles from any of the others. Plotting each of these locations on a map of the Virginia-Maryland area shows that these were just within a few miles of each other, well within the range of possibility for business or moving. If you find them close together, study the history to see when the counties were formed, from which jurisdictions. That'll help put the records in the right place. Another one was a family that had children born in New York State and Illinois that I knew of. And there was a gap. And of course, the direct ancestor of my husband was born in the middle of the group, but we didn't have a location. So how could we find her birth? Plotting the other children's birthplaces on a map shows that there's a long trail, which was commonly used at that point in time in the early 1800s, between the last New York location and the first in Illinois, with a 5-year gap, which was enough room for the 2 children that we were missing dates and places for. Checking for migration trails of that time period indicated that Ohio and Indiana were right along that trail. So sure enough, she was eventually found to have been born right outside Cleveland, Ohio. And the other child, well, she was during a brief stop there, which was just long enough for mother to have the pregnancy, the birth, and a little while after the birth for recovery. Then they moved on to Indiana, where the next child was born. Then they moved on to Illinois, where they ultimately settled and the rest of the family came. There's a great new multi-volume map guide by noted genealogist William Dollarhide called American Migration Route 1735 to 1815, which is available from numerous vendors. It's well worth checking out. These are just a few examples of using maps to plot the travels of your ancestors. For more information on using maps for tracking migration, here are some resources I find very helpful. As I mentioned, William Dollarhide. He's created numerous wonderful map guides for genealogists, in addition to the one just mentioned. Check those out, especially his map guide to the federal census. Cindy's List has a topic for maps and geography with oodles of links to helpful resources. The National Archives has the David Rumsey Map Collection, which is an online searchable collection of over 200,000 maps from the 16th through the 21st century for most of the world and even part of the universe. Find one for the time and place you're looking for, or at least as close as possible. FamilySearch.org has maps and lots of other relevant assistance on their research wiki. Just go to the page for the jurisdiction you're looking for, state, county, country, whatever you know, even a town, and see what you can find. And don't forget to Google genealogy migration routes or similar terms, or even just the place that you know online. I also use the same search terms on YouTube to find videos, including many by well-known organizations and genealogists. If you're a visual person, maps are critical to understanding where something occurred. Even if you don't consider yourself visual, using a map will help you verify you're in the right place. Well, that's it for today. Join me for the next Genealogy Lab as we explore using online databases effectively. Stay curious. This is Diana Chrisman Smith, and I'll see you from my lab next time.
You've been inside the Genealogy Lab with Diana Chrisman Smith, where every clue, every record, and every story brings us one step closer to knowing who we are. Stay curious and stay tuned for more from Preservation Oaks.
Welcome back. Let's get going. We're so glad you're back. Now on with the program.
Welcome back to Preservation Oaks. I'm your host, Sean Radcliff, and we're here today with Mrs. Catherine Traffis from Parker History in Parker, Colorado. I truly enjoyed the latest edition of the Genealogy Lab with Diana Chrisman Smith. Diana has such a wonderful way of taking the challenges of family history research and turning them into practical, useful guidance. Today's segment offered helpful insight into those wandering ancestors we all seem to encounter from time to time, and how maps can become valuable tools in helping us follow their journeys and better understand their lives. We hope these Genealogy Lab segments are helping you along your own family history path. Now let's return to our conversation with Mrs. Catherine Traffis and pick up where we left off. Welcome back, Catherine.
Glad to be back. John, you've been keeping me on my toes. Let's get back into the conversation.
All right. Catherine, are there any Parker stories that feel especially cinematic, the kind of story where you can instantly picture the setting?
There's one that I always have felt that would make a great scene in a movie. In 1899, the July 4th celebrations in Parker were always exciting for the residents. Had people coming in from the ranches and, contributing all the great food. But one of the things that early Parkerites used to really love was baseball. So in 1899, they had one of their best 4th of Julys ever. The baseball team won dramatically against another local team. We know this from some of the little local papers at the time. And then there was this amazing horse race that was also covered in the news. And Jim Parker, who was quite the equestrian, had a horse that he felt could be beat by no other. And there was a very dramatic horse race up and down Main Street. I mean, for people who are familiar with Parker today, it's very difficult to imagine a horse race happening up and down Main Street. And believe me, I've asked for the permits to pull one, but there's no way it's going to happen. So Jim Parker's horse and the owner of the mercantile, Norman Darcy, he decided that he had a horse that could beat Jim. So they had a horse race up and down Main Street, and it was just, it was just neck and neck. It was the owners riding, and it came down to this, that when they hit the wire, no one in the crowd knew who had won. It was that close. Gosh. It had been that brutal. And the judge standing at the line said that Mr. Darcy's horse had stuck out his tongue at the end and had therefore won by, quote unquote, by a lap.
Oh, goodness.
Not a real lap, but a lap of the tongue.
Yeah.
So that's the famous story. But, this was, I love imagining, I've seen pictures of our old baseball teams in their old uniforms. And we've actually had a baseball game with 1890s rules reenacted here in town one time.
Oh, cool.
It's quite dangerous, actually. People got hurt. But, like I've always thought that sort of community celebration with all the picnicking and the baseball game and the horse race is just a very exciting, it would make for a great movie scene or two.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic story. Thank you for sharing that. I was struck by the history of the Tom Newland cabin, especially because it opens up such a human window into early life there. What does that site reveal about the realities of Parker area life in the 1860s and after?
I find that one of the things that visitors to the Tallman cabin are struck by is just the small scale. The idea that you had four people, that John and Elizabeth Tallman, living with their two kids in this tiny house that is beautifully built. It was actually made, it's the kind of log cabin that's made Lincoln log style with no nails. Well, not completely Lincoln log. It's a mortise and tenon construction, so
Oh,
everything
okay.
is dovetailed one piece into the other
Yeah.
with these enormous logs. And the idea that one man, pretty much on his own, with the help of his wife, with little kids running around, would be building this cabin is quite, it's quite amazing. And one of the things that we have that we're very fortunate to have is that Elizabeth Tallman went by Libby. So Libby Tallman, she at the time of her death, she was Colorado's oldest living pioneer.
Oh,
She was 99 and 10 months or something like that. And she actually was able to write out her stories for the Colorado magazine. And they're very, very interesting, talking about how on the Tallman property, where the cabin now sits, it's been moved somewhat, but it's still where that original homestead would have been. But it was sitting on a Native American trail that was typically used, for different seasons of hunting and stuff like that. And so she actually got to know some of the natives quite well, which isn't your typical, it's not what you think of. Obviously, there's a very difficult history in Colorado having to do with the understandable conflict between Native Americans and settlers who, suddenly had these concepts of being able to own land.
right.
So obviously there was going to be a lot of conflict. But, she actually had daily interactions with them. They really liked her biscuits and expected her to bake lots of them so that they could all have one. But, she tells amazing stories about the dangers of living out there, the joys of living out there. They were close friends of the Parkers, and John Tallman was a politician also locally. But it really is an amazing story of making something out of absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
I like going back there. I really like going back there because it reminds you of how little you need to raise a family in love.
Did you say that her journal was in book form?
Yes, she had stories in Colorado Magazine. I think it was in the 1920s.
Okay. Okay.
That she had a couple of different things published.
I'll see if I can dig some of those up. Those would be so
You would
interesting.
you would have to dig a little bit, but you'd find it. It's digitized.
Oh,
You can get it
cool.
online.
Cool. Thank you for mentioning it. That's going to be
Yeah,
very
yeah,
interesting.
she was an amazing woman.
History really comes alive when people can connect it to ordinary life, just life in general. And Parker has some great windows into that world. Let's talk about the 1915 Parker Consolidated School, because I think listeners instantly connect when history gets personal through school life. What does that building tell us about the community that built it?
Well, I think that at the time that the Parker Consolidated School was built, so it was started in 1913, but really mostly 1914, and it was open for the 1914-15 school year. And oh my gosh, that was such a point of pride for the people who lived here. And essentially, the reason it's called a consolidated school is because up until this time, there were just the one-room schoolhouses, and there were 4 or 5 littered around the area, including the one that James Parker built, the Pine Grove Schoolhouse. And as the population grew, there was a bit of a boom in Parker after the railroad. The railroad would take a lot of the dairy products that the dairy farmers in the area would produce into Denver for sale. And more people were able to ranch out here and get their products sold. So there was a baby boom, and they built one big building, and it was built by, I had mentioned the O'Brien family. It was built by William O'Brien, who in addition to having ranched and run a tuberculosis sanatorium, also became a local builder. And it was his company who built the school. And we're so lucky in terms of preservation that this still exists, because the town of Parker owns it and runs it as part of their cultural department. And it got a Colorado Lottery grant. People who live in Colorado would know that the Colorado Lottery supports open spaces, but there's also a small portion of it that supports historic preservation.
Right.
And so they got a preservation grant. It's not entirely looking like the schoolhouse inside that it was, but it's what we call an adaptive reuse in the preservation world. So it has a little theater where people can go and hold classes there and meetings, and even banquets for weddings in the Ruth Memorial Chapel next door. But at the time, building that was a massive achievement. It was the first, eventually, after a few years, it was the first time that Parker had an accredited high school that they could graduate beyond the 8th grade. It was a center of activity for the town. It kind of really kicked off Parker's love for basketball. We had some really good basketball teams, boys and girls at that age. So, I think that it was definitely a huge step forward to have that school available for those kids.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, one of the biggest challenges for any historical organization is, how do you take all of these stories that you've been telling us and make them feel immediate for the public now? For someone who's never visited, what is the Parker Heritage Center, and what experience do you want people to have when they walk in?
The Heritage Center is our small museum. We've actually just received a nice grant from the town of Parker to redo it. But one of the hugest features of it is a World War I era diorama in the middle of the room. And it gives us an opportunity to lay out what life would have been like in Parker in the old days. We could have gone back further in time, but the 1918 timeframe was the one for which there was the most documentary evidence in terms of photos. So that's definitely a big draw. And we've also got pictures and artifacts and things like that. But I think that, what we really want people to experience when they come in there is a common sense of place. I think that in our area, we have a lot of people moving in from different parts of the country, and we really benefit from this one central story.
Oh, yeah.
To have. So it's like, I guess that when you say, what would you want people to experience when they come in? I would say, I would almost say a sense of common identity, if that makes sense. A shared sense of place. I think that's probably what we would want them to experience. And that small town feel that we've always been aiming for, that's really present in there.
Fantastic. Yeah, I would love that. If I just moved to a town, the first thing I'm going to do is look up the local genealogical and historical society and try to understand the history of the place, and how do I fit in that history, or how do I adapt to that history now that I'm a member of the town.
I find that people from everywhere get more excited. I cannot tell you how many times, Sean, I've heard someone say, I moved here and I had no idea that this was all here. And whether they've just arrived or if they've been there for 10 years, it sort of gives people a greater sense of belonging to understand these stories.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not their personal genealogical history, they're not of that descent. It's really just a common flavor for things.
What kinds of displays or exhibits are available at the Heritage Center?
Well, like I said, we have that diorama, and that is accurate to the shingle and the brick on the little buildings on a sort of a railroad scale model that's there.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yes. So, a lot of work went into that. And I think that it was done, oh gosh, it's a little more than 25 years ago now. It's been there for quite some time. And it really gives people an immediate flavor. So we love that. But people can also look up pictures. I think that one of the things that people in the developments around Parker, they want to understand what was on the land that they were on, and why are certain streets named after certain people. And I think that's one of their immediate connections usually, is saying, why is O'Brien Park called O'Brien Park?
Yeah, that's very cool.
Who was Mr. Parker? what was all that? So people really connect with the names, and especially little kids. I think that they always connect to those kinds of things.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love it when kids ask about street names, and street names are so important. Some towns name them after presidents, that kind of thing, but a lot of towns name them after their historical figures. And it just, like you said, it just enhances the children's knowledge of their own history when they learn the street names and what they're there for.
I think that's true. And, sometimes the names of the schools too, that people really like to connect to those stories. We have a local elementary school called Mammoth Heights Elementary because of all the mammoth bones that we found in the gulch.
Oh, I'll be darned.
in Millen Gulch, which you can see at our town hall, actually. You can go visit the bones of the mammoth. But I think that's a very, that really makes it present, for kids when you think that, wow, there were, well, first the dinosaurs and then, but, there were mammoths here. And
Yeah.
the idea that there could have been people and mammoths at the same time.
Catherine, what object or artifact in the collection tends to stop people in their tracks?
I think that there's one thing that people are very surprised to see, and we're very proud that it's been entrusted to us. But we have the Parker family Bible in our museum.
Oh, cool.
In one of the cases, and it's one of these. It was old before the Parker family who founded this area. Before it was old when they got it. So it's amazing to see, the births and deaths and marriages and stuff like that. That's the page we have it open to. And we're very proud that the family member who was holding it at the time felt that they could entrust that to us.
I used to buy family Bibles off of eBay.
Did you?
The very old ones, just to look at them, even if they weren't my family. And then I would I would try to figure out, and I think I did for all of them, what area of the country they were from or what family, and I would try to find the family and give the Bible back to them or donate it to the local historical society. It was a hoot for me. I loved it.
Oh, that is a wonderful thing to do. That's a really wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, and some of those Bibles,
so
they're
interesting.
Just beautiful. Beautiful.
Oh, yes. I mean, and this one is just a gorgeous. I don't know what it would have cost in their money in the day, but it's just a beautiful book.
Yeah, fantastic. Nice artifact.
It's really wonderful to have. And I think that, one of the things that we want to project to people when they come in and see it is if there's any other sort of pioneer families in the area who've inherited things that they could bring them to us and we'll help preserve them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We want them to trust us with these things.
Yep. Because you're going to professionally curate them and professionally preserve them.
Oh, yes. And we have professional partners in our county and our state who can help us with all those things.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Catherine, how do you decide what gets displayed when there are always more stories than you can fit into one space?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think that our space within the schoolhouse at Mainstreet isn't super large. And so, we have to keep things in cases, that are just limited in size. And so I think that what we try to do is to rotate out the exhibits. And sometimes, we'll tell a different story that maybe you didn't know the last time you came in. So, we do have storage and stuff where we keep things, but, some things should be on display all the time. Some of the pictures that we have so many amazing photographs that you really need to understand the Native American and the pioneer experience here. I think those things need to be permanently there, but there's other things that can come and go just because we're interested in it. We had in our collection a 1910s comptometer, which is not something anyone uses anymore. And it's kind of like a pre-calculator. It's a very big old machine and it makes kind of cash register like noises. And it's just for making fast accounting calculations.
Cool.
And so we got together an old slide rule and an abacus and made a new story about, the history of computation, which I suppose ends up with our phones, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's very cool.
That story.
Very cool.
So sometimes, we kind of have a mix of stable exhibits and changing exhibits. But, now that we're getting our big renovation with our grant from the town of Parker, we're very, very excited to be able to expand on the Native American stories and to kind of, and even like from some of the prehistoric stuff that I was talking to you about, we really want that to be a major part of the new experience as
Oh,
we
okay.
undertake that project.
Oh, that's going to be very cool.
I think it's going to be really cool. I'm so excited.
When's all that happening?
Well, so we're already underway. We sort of kicked off the project May 1st. And so we're going to be doing some planning throughout 2026. And we probably will have a grand reopening in early 2027.
Oh, that's very exciting for the community. Wow.
It really is. And we have a wonderful interpretive, a retired architect who's named Todd McMahon. And he's going to help us with all the stories, trying to figure out what stories to bring out.
Wow, very cool. And that takes us into another major part of this work, because preserving history isn't just about displaying it, it's also about saving it before it disappears. When people hear the phrase historic preservation, Catherine, they sometimes imagine paperwork, committees, and signs on buildings. But from your perspective, what does preservation really mean?
I think that, for us, because of the way that our town has evolved and our particular story, a lot of it has been urgent rescue work. The urgently moving in to stop a building from demolition. But now that our community's done a lot of that work, I think that, it's been very interesting to try and educate the community about how, in order to have these things in the future to enjoy, no one generation can ever drop the ball. We have to prioritize them in budgets for every administration that our town has.
Right.
And, that's just to keep that common sense of identity. So I think that, it has to be a community effort. And I think that it certainly has to be at the town level, but, it's something that we should probably prioritize more on the state and national level as well, as much as we can.
Yeah, I agree with you very much. We're losing so much every day.
We do. And there's been buildings in our area that we've lost. And I think that as a historical society, sometimes, I'll get requests for information through our website. And, the general citizen is very well meaning, but doesn't understand how early we would have to intervene to save some of these buildings. And when I say early, I mean maybe 30 years before it was coming down.
Right.
So, I think that there's really always there's the physical work that needs to be done, and then there's the creating the town's culture and setting what our priorities are.
So you would think that creating the town's culture, in addition to the hands-on work, are some of the biggest challenges in actually saving places like that?
I think so. I think that there's a great degree to which people aren't aware that there's no magical American institution or Colorado institution for the preserving of things that we care about.
That's right.
Our laws have to delicately balance, what the rights of private landowners are to make their living off of land they own and develop it if they see fit. And, we sometimes have to do some very creative things to get around that. And I think that, I've had people get in contact with me when there was something, a building that was about to be turned into a gas station. It's a story that every community knows. And, there's like, well, can't you do something? They'll say, like, there's got to be something you can do.
Right.
And it's like the family who owned the building didn't give us any other option other than to buy it. And we're a volunteer historical society. A lot of our laws don't really protect those things necessarily or set out strict rules for how would we determine whether one thing got preserved and not another. So I think that there's, there would have to be a lot more involvement of people than what we have at the moment, and a lot more money put into it than what we have.
Yeah, and especially with Parker growing so dramatically over time, and the town, I mean, you've tried your best to address the challenge of preserving historic heritage while growing and changing. How do you think a community keeps its identity in the middle of that kind of expansion?
I think that, I think we've taken a good tack in Parker. I think that right from the very beginning, in part because of what the town was going through at the time, but from the time it incorporated in 1981, you know, history was part of their mission, the idea of having that small town feel. And I think that that's again, it's the ball that can never be dropped. It just has to be part of has to be thought of at every stage of the community's development. And honestly, I think that our town government has done a really good job of trying to keep that in mind. There'll always be the people who say, you know, I don't want them to build the development that's going in behind my house. And I have one being built as I speak behind my house.
Yeah.
Where the mammoth bones were found. So, you know, it can get very, very difficult, but you know, there has to be that constant balance while maintaining that keeping the stories and keeping that shared sense of place. And I think that our little historic downtown bit, plus some other sites, you know, like the 20 Mile House and the Tallman Cabin, I think that really helps us maintain that. But of course, all of that is meaningless unless if you're not holding events that highlight those things.
Right. Yep. That's absolutely right. You've offered us several lessons that other towns could use across the country. Is there any other lesson you could offer for other growing towns across the country?
I mean, I think that making sure that it's part of your policy right from the beginning. I think one thing that Parker has done well is that the town has sent out a lot of surveys over the years and made historic preservation part of them, so that when I'm not on the town council. I talk about them like I'm not on the volunteer part, but I know these people very well and I've been interacting with them for many years. But I think that, you know, if you take the community's temperature every so often with surveys and that sort of thing, they will probably find, like us, that the history is very important to citizens. History has actually ranked in the top of all those surveys that we've done over the past 20 years that I've lived here.
Yep. Salt Lake does that too. Every year we get a survey on a whole lot of different topics, and I really love it. It's great.
Well, I think that it gives the community a voice as they're making their plans.
Absolutely.
You know, I think that it's always one of the lessons that we've learned is to make relationships with developers, because that has been part of our disaster story and our triumph story, you know, where we've had people like Dennis Niewerner who have given us the opportunity to preserve things. And we've had other landowners in the past, like, for example, the ones the name's not coming to the top of my head, but the Tallman Cabin was another one that was saved back in the 90s. So, you know, I think that being able to have a conversation with developers sometimes can be really meaningful too.
Yeah. I also think one of the smartest things the society can do is make history interactive, not just informative, but memorable and fun.
Oh, definitely. And, you know, I think that especially if you want to keep the younger generations involved, break out the costumes. I know it's hard, you know, with the volunteers, like we always say, I know it's hard and sometimes it feels silly, but if you've had the experience like I have of a little girl coming up and asking you if you're a princess.
Oh, goodness.
You know, it's just, I think that's, if you can make the leap between that and being in a character, now you've found something.
Yeah, fantastic.
Now you found something.
Listeners, I'd like to once again provide you with the contact information for Parker History. You can find them on the web at www.parkerhistory.org. You can email them at pahs@parkerhistory.org. The Parker Heritage Center is located in the Schoolhouse at Mainstreet at 19650 Main Street, Parker, Colorado, 80138. And you can find them on Facebook if you just search for Parker History. Catherine, it's time for a break for a few minutes. It goes really fast.
Just when things were getting good, right? Thanks for the interruption, though. We could use a short break.
Yep, you're welcome. Listeners, we'll be right back after an important message about becoming a volunteer at Parker History.
In a fast-changing world, it's easy for local stories to disappear. Old photographs fade. Historic buildings vanish. family memories are lost, and before long, entire generations of community history can quietly slip away. But in Parker, Colorado, there's a group of dedicated volunteers working to make sure that doesn't happen.
Parker History is preserving the stories, landmarks, and memories that helped shape Parker and the surrounding region, from early homesteads and stagecoach routes to schools, railroads, ranches, dairy farms, and the people who built the community long before modern development arrived. And now, they're inviting new volunteers to become part of that mission.
Whether you love history, enjoy meeting people, want to support your community, or simply want to give back in a meaningful way, Parker History offers opportunities to help preserve the heritage of Douglas County for future generations. Volunteers assist with exhibits, events, educational programs, historical research, archives, preservation projects, tours, and visitor engagement at the Parker Heritage Center, located in the historic Schoolhouse on Mainstreet. No history degree is required, just curiosity, community spirit, and a willingness to help keep local history alive. Because history isn't only found in textbooks. It's found in cabins and photographs, in old schoolhouses and family stories, in forgotten trails and everyday lives. And sometimes, all it takes is one volunteer to help save those stories before they're lost forever.
If you've ever wanted to make a real difference in your community, this is your opportunity. To learn more about volunteering with Parker History, visit www.parkerhistory.org. The Parker Heritage Center is located in the Schoolhouse at Mainstreet, 19650 Main Street, Parker, Colorado, 80138. For additional information, email pahs@parkerhistory.org or search Facebook for Parker History.
Parker History, preserving the past, protecting community memory, and building connections between generations, one volunteer at a time.
Just a reminder about the military holidays we observe annually in these United States. Armed Forces Day is to acknowledge those still in uniform serving our nation. Veterans Day is for those who served and have hung up the uniform. We honor those who served. Memorial Day is for those who never made it out of their uniform. We reflect on those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Please teach your children to observe these days each year.
Do you know who said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty"? Those famous words were written by Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson knew that human nature tends to cause us to take for granted the freedoms for which others have fought valiantly. He knew that Americans had to be alert, or the essential freedoms of democracy would be taken away. That's why Jefferson gave his warning to the Americans of his era and to their descendants. He set the price for liberty as eternal vigilance. And Americans through the years have heeded Jefferson's warning. They have been alert to detect and resist the enemies of liberty. Remember the words of Thomas Jefferson. They are part of your American heritage. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance.
Hey, history lovers! Your family's story is epic. But if you don't hit record, who's going to tell it? Whether it's your grandpa's first job, your aunt's civil rights march, or the time your family moved across the country with nothing but a suitcase, it's history, and it deserves to be heard. Start by sitting down with the storytellers in your life. Ask questions. Listen. Use your phone. Record the moment. These stories can't be Googled. Once they're gone, they're gone. Not sure where to start? Visit StoryCorps.org for easy tips and sample questions to get your first interview rolling. Be the one who saves the story. The Family Archivist.
This message was brought to you by Preservation Oaks, because your voice matters, and your history does too.
And now, back to Preservation Oaks.
Welcome back to Preservation Oaks. I'm your host, Sean Radcliff, and we're here today with Mrs. Catherine Traffis from Parker History in Parker, Colorado. Let's pick up where we left off. Catherine, I'm learning so much. Everybody is. Thank you and welcome back.
Thanks. Glad to be back. Had a chance to stretch and grab some coffee. Now that we're back, let's get this history party started again.
Fantastic. I want to talk about how you make history appealing to younger audiences because this seems like something Parker History really understands. What have you learned about what makes history click for younger people?
You know, I think that since I started volunteering for Parker History, I've learned a lot about how to interact with the kids and what is really going to light them up. I think that, as I mentioned before, I think that costumes for the kids really helps them connect to the previous time. I hope that helps them travel back in time. But, you know, obviously with the younger kids, we don't get into calendar facts and stuff like that. We have a lot more interactive stuff. Like we've been doing an event called Parker Quest for many years, where we give kids a passport and they go throughout the historic downtown district and they learn a little bit about each stop as they go, and they get stickers and things, and you know, they maybe answer a little trivia question so you can enter a raffle at the end, that kind of thing. I think that really helps them. And usually what we do, I'll set up each person who's enacting someone at their stop with a few fun facts that kids really like, you know, or maybe some artifacts and things they can have there, but usually just, you know, fun stories that they like. Like kids are definitely disproportionately interested in the fact that the Rhode Island Hotel, which still exists in one form on Mainstreet, had the first potties in Parker, the first indoor plumbing that existed, and how that would be. You know, that really keeps them thinking. The Consolidated School, when it first opened, it had horse-drawn buses. You know, things that relate to their everyday experiences that a kid would have, I think are really helpful.
Yeah, you make quite an investment in the Quest idea, and it's a wonderful idea. It takes quite an investment to set all that up.
Oh, it does. It has actually taken quite a bit of time. This year, we're taking a break from it because we have the broader American History Celebration, and we want to make sure we throw enough effort into that. And give kids some, maybe this year we'll reflect a little bit about being good citizens too, and kind of understanding the whole scope of our history.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Catherine, if early Parker had social media, who would have had the biggest following?
I think, actually, that's a great question, and I have a definitive answer for you. I think that a woman named Nellie Goddard would have been an absolute influencer. She was the proprietress, along with her husband, of the Rhode Island Hotel that I just mentioned, that had the first potties in town. And my gosh, that couple, they had so much going on. You know, her husband was a justice of the peace, and he sold coffins and tires, and they ran their hotel. And she actually wrote for the Parker News, and she would write the social sections. And it's so, I don't know, Sean, maybe I'm sure you've done this, but when you go back to read into old local newspapers, it's so interesting what becomes newsworthy at that time. You know, some of the entries would just be, well, the Parkers visited the Tallmans for dinner to celebrate the birth of a new calf. You know, I'm exaggerating that one. Or, you know, just like Mr. Newland has had a fever for a week, but he's getting better now.
Right.
That was news.
Yep.
I love reading through those, but she was the social busy bee.
Yeah, you would have to be if you're running a Rhode Island hotel in town.
Oh, definitely. I think it was the hub of activity, and it was right adjacent to the railway station. So people would be coming to visit too.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. Way to go, Nellie Goddard.
Yeah, she was cool.
Now, here's a very important question for you. How can listeners financially support Parker History?
Oh, that is an important question. You know, you can become a member through, if you visit our website at parkerhistory.org, we have a shop, and one of the things that you could buy is a membership. We also are right now raising money for the restoration of our Tallman Newland cabin. And there's a special donation page for that to the far right of the menu. And we would love anything that people can offer, even if it's a few dollars. to try and get that going. The cabin has been around surviving the weather since the 1860s, and we would like it to go on for another 150 years.
Oh, yeah. That'd be great. Thank you for that information.
Oh, thanks for asking.
What steps is your organization taking to digitize documents and photos, and how is that going to improve accessibility for future generations?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that that's one of our major concerns right now. I think that more and more people especially want access to photos, and we have a large number of photos that we still need to scan in and document and put online. That's really hard for a volunteer organization to do. We did have an intern who did a whole bunch for us one summer, but we have lots and lots and lots more. So we have a lot of work to do. We want to make sure that we do it properly. So, that's ongoing. But we also have the support of a wonderful Douglas County library system that has a specialized department just for archives.
Oh, cool.
So whatever we do digitize, we'll share with them so that people can look them up easily. Although those people within our system, they're housed in Castle Rock, which is a community, 10, 15 minutes south of us. There's still quite a lot that they can access online.
Oh, that's good.
So that really helps share the stories. And, I think it helps teachers a lot too.
Oh, yeah. Is there curriculum in the area?
There is a Colorado history curriculum. Some schools for elementary, some schools do it in the second grade on one side of our town, and on the other side, they do it in fourth grade.
Oh.
So we like to connect with that. We've created a tour that they can download and do on their smartboards.
Oh, cool.
That can help with that. So, and that's something that you can download on a phone, on a laptop. You can find it in your phone's app store. Travel stories is what you look for. It's stories written with a Y-S at the end, not an I-E-S, as any grammarian would tell you to spell it properly. So it's uniquely spelled. It's two words squished together, capital T travel and capital S stories.
So you go to the Play Store or whatever the repository is, and you look for Travel Stories, STORYS, and download that app?
Well, and it's free to download.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of other subscribers there. So if you're traveling and you're interested in other historical tours and stuff like that, you could take ours when you're in town. You can play it remotely. You can just watch it and look at the pictures and listen to the descriptions.
Oh, that is so cool.
Which is what a lot of the teachers do when they don't have the budgets for the school buses and stuff like that to come down and see us physically.
Yeah.
But you can also, just as a citizen wanderer, you can download it on your phone and do our tour and then connect it to other tours. So if Pikes Peak, for example, has a Travel Stories tour, that's free. Actually, Rocky Mountain National Park has one that is for a small fee, but ours is free and it's connected with a lot of other great things. You could do a beer tour in Boulder if you're up for that.
What a nice app. That's really great. What kind of investment does it take for your organization to make that work?
It actually was a significant upfront investment. The ongoing cost isn't so bad. It's just $750 a year to keep it going.
Okay.
Definitely worth it because we can see that, we've got a few thousand people downloading it every year.
Oh, yeah.
But the upfront was a little tricky. So we had applied for an SCFD grant, which in the Denver area is a small portion of sales tax funds for cultural and artistic events.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
Also big museums, things like the Denver Zoo and stuff like that. And so we applied for some funds for that. And so I used as matching funds. Anyone who's ever applied for grants knows that you have to have matching funds.
Yeah.
So our local Rotary had donated some money, and I donated my services as a writer to write the tour.
Very cool.
So we were able to get matching funds for the remaining. So I think it was about $20,000. It was a bit, but I think we were happy to do it. I think that we just really wanted to provide something, especially for teachers in classrooms when those volunteers of us who work during the day aren't always able to come out.
Yeah, and anyone around the world can download it and enjoy it. And that's great.
Yes, they can.
Wow, nice. Now that's what the internet is all about.
Yes, and when you're physically taking the tour, if you're down amongst the buildings, it's GPS located, so it will trigger the next story when you approach a new historic building.
Wow, way nice.
Written by me, but not voiced over by me. God forbid. I chose.
You got a great voice.
I preferred the voice of generously donated services of our Parker's former mayor, Mike Wade, who has a wonderful baritone.
Oh, cool, cool.
So he reads out the stories.
That's very cool. Thank you for that. Could you give a brief summary of the size and variety of your collection?
Like I said, I think that right now, tackling the photographs, that we've got quite a number of photographs that not everybody has access to right now. But we have a lot of artifacts too. They definitely vary widely. We have everything from old clothing that people donated,
right,
that would have been worn back in the pioneer days. And we have things like the branding irons from the different families who would cattle ranch around here, and the brands they put on their animals. These families didn't really know what to do with these brands anymore.
There's a lot of people that collect those,
Oh yeah, well, we've got quite a few. We have everything from old correspondence to some of the wonderful needlework that some of the women in town did back in the day. Quilts and pieces of lace finery and all kinds of interesting things.
Oh, that's so cool.
One thing that we have permanently on loan to the 17-mile house in the neighboring town is a 1824 Conestoga wagon and everything it contained.
That is cool.
And that is very cool. And another thing that we have that my husband, Ray Traffis, is the treasurer of our organization at Parker History, but he is also wears the hat of fire truck driver.
Oh, cool.
So we also have what was Parker's first volunteer fire truck, and it's extremely difficult to drive. It's a 1940s Army crash truck that was converted into a pumper truck.
Oh, wow.
Kids love that thing.
Oh, yeah.
We disconnect the battery so that they can play. They can touch anything they want and just climb all over it. So he's our fire truck driving man.
That's great. What tools or software does your organization rely on for cataloging and managing your collection?
I will confess to working for Microsoft during the day.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So obviously I have all the Microsoft products. We don't really have an actual cataloging software. We've been kind of doing spreadsheets and stuff.
Yeah.
And we do need to change that. But again, that's part of the ongoing struggle of getting everything cataloged properly.
Oh, yeah, it is. A session and all of the curation and all of that, it's quite a discipline.
It is. And, it's been taking on the form lately of the board members going out on a Saturday to the storage unit. And that's the toughest stage to be in, for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Dusting off stuff.
And then cataloging it, photographing it, describing it. Oh, my
Yes.
gosh.
All of that. I see that you've been down a similar road.
Yeah, I got very interested in it with this podcast, and I interviewed a curator and an archivist, and it's just so interesting. The things that they have to do, you have to do it professionally,
Well, and I don't have an education in that, but I did have the opportunity, as I mentioned at the top of the show, to work for the Society of Antiquaries of London when I was living in London. And the curator there taught me so much about how to preserve things. And especially things that are much older than the things that we have here in Parker's collection.
I'd like to talk about your funding for a moment. Can you tell us about the funding sources for your organization and what financial goals you're working toward this year?
Sure. We actually do have, we've achieved enough of a relationship with the town government that we do have some annual support from them for operating costs. So we do get that. Most of the rest of it is individual support, from interested people in the community. We are, like I said, seeking donations for that Palm Newland cabin because, well, we've kind of fallen into a bit of a conundrum with that. There was a tax issue that was overwhelmingly passed in our area for open space funds, and that included a portion for historical preservation.
Oh, cool.
But that's kind of gotten tied up politically, and we didn't end up getting the money we needed for the Thalman cabin quite urgently. So, we're trying to do that on our own. I'm sure you've heard many stories of struggle John,
Oh,
in
yes.
the course of creating this podcast.
That's why I always ask this question, because I want your listeners, our listeners, to know, what you're going through and the challenges you're facing and what you're bringing in, It's important.
Well, and it's funny too, because sometimes when you do succeed in getting a grant, it's like, for example, the fact that we are able to reimagine this year our museum. That's a fantastic gift.
Yep.
But it's something that can only be applied towards that particular thing. So we still have other needs in terms of, the cabin, and we actually have 2 small cemeteries that Parker History owns as well,
Okay.
with burials that they're outside of what's in the Parker Cemetery that's run by a separate organization. So we have a lot of responsibilities that are hard to meet, and we always keep trying to apply for grants. The SCFD has helped us a lot in the past when it comes to running events and stuff. But it's difficult. It's come to the point where I worry about the structures themselves.
Right. Are you getting any corporate funding?
No, actually, we don't have any corporate funding.
Okay. So listeners, especially those in the area, please donate. Join as a member, support them. It's important.
Thank you. And I appreciate you pointing it out.
Do you have any other fundraising initiatives available for those who want to support your organization? Are you selling coins or bricks or certificates or any of those things?
A brick is not a bad idea. I will file that away. We have just started doing a fundraising event in the fall around ghost stories. Ooh. And so if there's anyone living in the area who wants to, have dinner and some ghost stories, we'll be holding that in October, and you can find that on the events page at parkerhistory.org. And we also sell in our shops. We sell books, and you could buy memberships there, which we always have every year. We always have a couple of exclusive events just to encourage people to actually become members, although most of our events are free. So that's something that people can do. And of course, you can always just donate money out of the goodness of your heart.
Absolutely.
Whether you're coming to a program or not.
How much is a membership and what are the benefits?
It's $15 a year for individuals and $20 for couples or families. And so that gets you into all our best events. I mean, they still do have to pay for our dinner fundraiser, but we always have a Christmas luncheon program that's just for members, and usually an annual picnic in the summer that's just for members.
Very, very cool. Thank you for mentioning all of that. And that's very reasonable membership for a whole year for $15.
Well, and when you think about it, I think that when it comes to, people in your local historical societies, you really have to think about it like watching PBS. You know what I mean? It really can't exist without people's donations and support. And when you become a member, it's really just to support your community. And we hope that you come out, and we always offer a couple of freebies for that. We hope that people will do it just to support us and become voting members too. That's another thing you can do when you get a membership, is that you can decide who's on our board. You can decide, what sorts of decisions we make.
Yeah, jump in. The water's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Catherine, what volunteer roles does your organization offer for community members interested in getting involved?
We have a lot of things that people can do on a lot of different levels. If you can help us man a booth at a local event, and, even for people who aren't, very mobile or very, want to get hands-on with anything, that's absolutely great. We also have done things. We have rallied up people to help us make repairs on that cabin, for example, or, help us maintain the grounds and things like that. So for people who are good with their hands, we can always use those kinds of people. I think in the coming year or two, we're probably going to be looking for a lot of volunteers to help us archive those materials like we were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Because we definitely want to make more of those things available to people doing genealogical research and, just teachers in schools, people who are just interested. We want to give them access to the pictures so that they can imagine the wonderful stories that we're telling them in more detail.
And speaking of history, does your organization conduct oral history interviews?
Yes, actually, we can facilitate oral history interviews, and we use the format that the Douglas County Library System They hold the oral history in their library system. And so we kind of have an unspoken agreement with all the historical societies in the area that if we ever record oral histories, they need to also land there so that people can look them up in one place.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
We're very fortunate to have a library system that can accommodate that.
Yeah, you can't imagine the number of times I've gone into towns when I was doing professional genealogy and had to go to the local library, the genealogy society, the historical society, and other areas to get everything that I could get. But you're saying, hey, we're all going to donate to the local library. It's in one place.
Yeah, and actually, the library system has genealogical resources too.
Oh, cool.
That you can use if you have a library card. And I know that, a large proportion of the people who live in Parker are part of the LDS Church, and they do great genealogical research.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. For somebody wanting to dive into local history, what resources or reading materials would you suggest?
We always suggest starting with the local history book which is just called Parker, Colorado, that we offer on our website.
Okay.
Because it gives you just a solid background. And there's also a local author named Sandra Welchel, and she has a book available on Amazon that's in the Images of America series. I'm sure that you've seen some of those in, museum of bookshops and stuff like that. So we were very fortunate that she undertook that project so that we can be part of that whole Images of America series. And you can get that on Amazon.
Oh, very cool. Thank you for that. Can you talk about your website for a moment? I know you've got a very beautiful website, well maintained. Can you talk about that?
Oh, for sure. This is probably the time to admit, some of the other historical societies around here, because a lot of us are getting older and, maybe are not digital natives, and maintaining the website is definitely one of the problems for a lot of historical societies.
Yeah.
That's unless you have all the computer science majors living at home that I do. So actually, it was my son Daniel, when he was 14, sort of reimagined the Parker History website in a way that I could maintain.
Oh, that's good.
That way, there's a lot fewer eye rolls between me and Daniel as I ask him questions about how to manage something on the website.
Yeah.
He dumbed it down for me quite a bit. But it does, one of the things that it does have, there's some great pictures, and we're always adding new pictures to it. On the homepage is that Travel Stories tour. There's a plugin on the website. So if people don't have the opportunity to come to Parker and do the Travel Stories tour, they can watch the whole thing right from the homepage of our website. If you're on a desktop, that is. It doesn't display well on phones that way. Otherwise, if you're using a phone, I would suggest to do it from the Travel Stories app, from your app store.
Okay, very cool.
So,
you've got tons of stuff on your website, tons of great content.
Oh, well, thank you so much. A lot of the webpage information that I upkeep was originally written by a wonderful man named Larry Smith, who we have lost in the last couple of years. And he was our curator for many years. And I have all his files here at home. So even though he's gone, I have to give a shout out to Larry for all the meticulous research that he did during his lifetime. It's great stuff to have. And then, because my son was able to fix the website up a little bit, each page we have different local sites on there, and each one has a Google Maps locator on it. Nice. So if you're ever reading up about something and you want to go to it, you can jump right in the car and go there.
Yep, very cool. Well, thank you for that. Before we wrap, is there any additional message or important information you'd like to share with the community or your members?
I would just say that we have to recognize that preservation is a continuous effort, and that, like I said, no one generation can ever drop the ball. It's something that has to be done. If you ever have the opportunity to influence the younger people in our community to become interested in our history, please do. It's something that will be for the greater good in the long run. And again, I also think, in this 2026 being a big anniversary for our nation, it's important to look at these stories and to understand where we've come from, the mistakes we've made and the successes we've had, so that you can be a better citizen. Understand the Constitution. Don't give up this opportunity this year to really look back at what an inspired document that is.
Yep.
And I say this, I was born a Canadian, so I'm saying it with a European parent. So like, I too, have learned this stuff from the ground up, and it's worth learning. So please do dig into this stuff. It's 2026. Don't miss it.
We have an episode coming up on the 250th anniversary, and it's coming up near July 4th. I think it's June 30th. June 30th. Anyway, we've already recorded it. It's all about the Constitution and that kind of thing. I encourage people to listen.
That's very cool. I'm glad that you did that.
Catherine, I'm so grateful for your time and insights. It's been fascinating to hear about the dedication and heart you put into serving your members in the community. Truly, meeting you has been a real highlight, and I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you too, Sean. It's just so wonderful to know that there's someone out there doing a podcast who cares about preservation as much as I do. And I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll end our time with our guest, Mrs. Catherine Traffis from Parker History in Parker, Colorado. Listeners, please stay tuned for my comments and wrap-up, which is coming up next. Hey, welcome back. As we conclude today's episode of Preservation Oaks, I find myself reflecting on just how remarkable local history truly is. Our guest for this episode has been Mrs. Catherine Traffis from Parker History, located in Parker, Colorado, in the heart of Douglas County. Catherine is an educated, dedicated, and thoughtful preservation professional whose passion for history is immediately evident. Throughout our conversation, she shared not only the history of Parker itself, but something even more valuable, a sense of place, a sense of memory, and an appreciation for the generations who helped shape that community. Catherine, thank you sincerely for joining us. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to spend time with you. One of the things that stood out to me during our discussion was the realization that Parker is in many ways a crossroads of history. Long before subdivisions and modern roads appeared, this region sat at the meeting point of multiple cultures, migration routes, and ways of life colliding together over centuries. Native peoples traveled and hunted here. Stage routes crossed the landscape. Ranchers, farmers, merchants, railroad travelers, and settlers followed. What appears at first glance to be a modern Colorado community carries within it layers of stories reaching far deeper than many might expect. And perhaps that's one of the greatest lessons of local history. History isn't merely found in capitals, battlefields, or famous monuments. It's found in communities. It's found in ordinary places where people worked, struggled, celebrated, built families, and tried to create better lives. Parker is one of those places. Many of our listeners around the world live in cities whose origins disappear into antiquity, places founded hundreds or even thousands of years ago. So it may come as a surprise to learn that Parker, Colorado, was incorporated only in 1981. And yet age alone doesn't determine historical importance. Communities do, people do, memory does. What impressed me most today is how Parker History works to preserve not only buildings and artifacts, but the human stories that give those objects meaning. Throughout our conversation, Catherine brought those stories to life. I found myself smiling at the tale of Parker's dramatic 4th of July celebration in 1899. Picture it for a moment. Crowds gathered along Mainstreet. the local baseball team victorious, excitement in the air, and then a horse race charging up and down what is now modern Parker, with Jim Parker himself involved in a neck-and-neck competition so close that nobody in the crowd could determine the winner. And then came that unforgettable detail. The race decided, according to the judge, because one horse stuck out its tongue at precisely the right moment. What a marvelous image. History often survives through dates and documents, but sometimes it survives through stories that simply make us laugh and help us picture the people who came before us as real human beings. And there were many of such moments today. We talked about tuberculosis in the old sanatorium associated with the O'Brien family and the twin houses, reminders of an era when families crossed entire regions of our country in search of healing and hope. It's difficult for us today to imagine the fear that diseases like consumption once inspired. As Catherine wisely observed, many of us might hesitate to return to the past, not because history lacks charm, but because medical realities were so uncertain and unforgiving. Yet those stories also remind us of something else. Communities helped one another, people adapted, and they still do. And places like Parker became part of that larger story of care, resilience, and survival. I was also struck by Parker history's commitment to younger generations. Too often people assume that children and teenagers have little interest in the past. But Parker history seems to understand something very important. History becomes meaningful when people can touch it, walk through it, and experience it. Programs like Parker Quest with passports, historical stops, costumes, stories, and interactive learning are exactly the kind of creative outreach that helps transform history from a school subject into a living experience. Children may not remember every date, but they remember stories, and they remember laughter. They remember that Parker once had horse-drawn school transportation, and that one local hotel proudly featured the first indoor plumbing in town. Those are the details that stay with people, and the details that matter, because they form the foundation of future preservationists, future historians, and future citizens who understand the value of the communities they inherit. Parker History has already accomplished much. This volunteer-led organization preserves and shares the story of Parker through exhibits, educational outreach, preservation projects, public programming, and stewardship of important historic resources. The Society operates the Parker Heritage Center and maintains the Tom and Newland Cabin, the town's last remaining log structure and one of the final physical connections to Parker's earliest years. They also provide upkeep and care for 2 local cemeteries. These are meaningful accomplishments. But preservation work is never truly finished. In fact, one of the realities we discussed today is that success often creates new responsibilities. As Parker History expands its educational partnerships and community programming, the Society faces an increasing need for help. And so, listeners, this is where history becomes personal. Parker History needs volunteers of all kinds. The Society needs assistance in cataloging artifacts. They need help digitizing photographs and fragile ephemera. They need individuals who can support events, community outreach, education efforts, and preservation work. And this need is particularly pressing because all but one of the Society's board members still maintain demanding day jobs and often conduct Society business during weekends, at night, and holidays. And that's a tremendous sacrifice, and it deserves recognition. So if you're listening from Parker or the surrounding region, perhaps this is an opportunity worth considering. Veterans organizations, Odd Fellows, retired professionals, senior communities, history enthusiasts, retired educators, high school and college students seeking experience, public history interns, genealogists, archivists, museum-minded volunteers. There is meaningful work waiting for everyone. And if Mrs. Traffis and Parker History choose to continue expanding educational partnerships and internship opportunities, there's promising avenues nearby. Arapahoe Community College and its Parker connections may provide students pursuing history, education, computer science, communications, humanities, or community engagement. Nearby four-year institutions, including the University of Colorado System and Colorado State University, also represent possible pipelines for public history, archival, and preservation-minded students seeking hands-on experience. Because this is the reality many small historical organizations face. The passion exists, the collections exist, the stories exist. What's often missing is simply enough helping hands. And Parker History also faces immediate preservation needs. Donations are needed to support refurbishment and preservation efforts connected to the Heritage Center and the Tallman Newland Cabin. Buildings, after all, don't preserve themselves. Wood ages, roofs fail, environmental conditions change, and each year that passes places greater pressure on limited budgets and volunteer resources. So, if today's conversation moved you, please consider supporting Parker History through donations, membership, volunteering, or simply by visiting and learning. Because these places matter. And I often remind listeners that history is not automatically preserved. Somebody has to choose to preserve it. Somebody has to choose to care. Somebody has to choose to remember. Before we leave today, I'd like to thank Catherine once again. Catherine, your professionalism, warmth, intelligence, and commitment to preservation were evident throughout this conversation, and it was a genuine pleasure to learn from you and to hear the stories you shared about Parker and the people who helped build it. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us here on Preservation Oaks. If today's episode reminded you of your own hometown, your own historical society, or your own community stories, then perhaps that's exactly the point. Because every town has a story, and every community has memory, and every generation inherits the responsibility to decide what will be preserved and what may quietly disappear. So wherever you may be listening from today, whether from Colorado, across America, or somewhere around the world, I encourage you to visit your local museum, support your historical society or genealogical society, ask questions, record family stories, and help preserve the places and memories that connect us to one another. Because history is not merely about the past, it's about stewardship. And it's about identity. And ultimately, it's about deciding what kind of ancestors we ourselves will become. All right, I'd like to provide listeners with the contact information for the organization one last time. You can find Parker History on the internet at www.parkerhistory.org. You can email them at pahs@parkerhistory.org. The Parker Heritage Center is located in the Schoolhouse at Mainstreet at 19650 Main Street, Parker, Colorado, 80138. And you can find them on Facebook if you look for Parker History. If you're a listener in the area the organization serves and you're not already a member, please consider joining and supporting them. I hope this information helps the audience understand how valuable the organization is to the community and what kinds of excellent services they have to offer to their members and the public. Parker History is truly one of our nation's Preservation Oaks. Now let me tell you about the next episode of Preservation Oaks. It's our July 4th episode, and we're celebrating 250 years of America. We reflect on the journey of a nation shaped by courage, sacrifice, innovation, and an enduring commitment to the ideals of liberty and self-governance. From the founding generation to the present day, this episode explores not just where we've been, but what it means to preserve and carry forward the story of America for future generations, and it's streaming soon on Podbean, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, and all other major platforms. This episode is more than a celebration. It's a moment of reflection, a moment of gratitude, and a reminder that history is not just something we study, it's something we live. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Music used today is from Cymbalbird, Score Wizards, Epic Man, Eaton EP, and Premium Beat. Hey, this is Sean Radcliffe. See you all next time on Preservation Oaks. And until then, keep on giving and keep on living the good life.
You can visit at www.microstreamradio.com. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted by Microstream Radio. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, reproduced, copied, or used anywhere without the written permission of Microstream Radio. Preservation Oaks starring Sean Radcliffe originates in Salt Lake City, Utah. Be sure to join us for our next episode on your favorite podcast platform. This is Matthew Adams speaking. Preservation Oaks has come to you through the worldwide podcast platform Podbean, and our home is preservationoaks.podbean.com. Hopefully you found today's episode useful, informative, and thought-provoking. If so, please follow, comment, or subscribe. Remember that being free means being free to be curious, and that historical and genealogical societies and museums allow us to discover the past, be free to explore, where curiosity opens every door. Thanks to everyone for listening. Stay cozy, curious, and keep exploring the incredible stories that shape our world. Remember to cherish and support the preservation of history in your own communities. The content of this program is provided for educational and informational purposes only. Some material included in this program may be copyrighted by third parties. However, under Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act, the doctrine of fair use allows the limited use of copyrighted material without requiring permission from the rights holders when used for purposes such as education, criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. These uses are legally permitted even if they might otherwise constitute infringement. If you wish to use copyrighted material from this program for purposes beyond fair use, you must obtain permission from the copyright owner. If you believe your copyrighted material has been used in this program in a way that does not qualify as fair use, please contact us at Preservation Oaks at gmail.com. Thank you,